Ladies and gentlemen, on what seemed like an ordinary, quiet Monday morning, a political and economic earthquake suddenly erupted out of Washington. President Donald Trump, with a brief but powerful statement, sent shockwaves around the world. The United States would double import tariffs on a slew of strategic metals, from copper, aluminum, steel, and rare earths to even Swiss gold bullion. The White House asserted this was a necessary move to protect national security and strengthen American industry. The message was clear and firm. America doesn't just want to reduce dependence, it wants full self-sufficiency in mining and metallurgy. Because to the Trump administration, natural resources are not merely commodities, they're the foundation of national defense, of technology, of superpower strength. A decision rooted in the America First vision was being rolled out in the most aggressive way possible. But right after the thunderclap from Washington, global markets plunged into chaos. Gold prices soared to a new record, copper and rare earths fluctuated wildly, and trading floors were thrown into disarray like a ship caught in a sudden storm. From Wall Street to Tokyo, from Frankfurt to Seoul, emergency news bulletins blared nonstop. Auto, electronics, construction, and energy corporations all raised red flags at once. The world scrambled to recalculate, while investors were left reeling, unsure of what tomorrow might bring. That shockwave, intended to revive American industry, ended up striking hardest at the very mining towns that were supposed to benefit first. In Arizona, West Virginia, and Nevada, communities with generations of mining heritage waited anxiously for a brighter future. People believed that jobs would return, wages would rise, and their towns would come back to life. But that hope within just a few weeks had turned into confusion and disappointment. And from here, the story takes a different turn, because instead of sparking a revival, this tariff policy triggered a downward spiral, a recession brewing right within the heart of America, where dreams of industrial resurgence suddenly gave way to a tragic, unfolding crisis. At first, when the headline "Tariffs to Protect National Security" appeared on the front pages of major newspapers, many Americans applauded. In mining regions long buried under unemployment, people dared to hope that the excavators would roar back to life, the tunnels would light up again, and the sound of ore trains would echo like in the old days. In Arizona, towns surrounding vast copper mines were abuzz. Copper will be mined again. Jobs are coming back. In West Virginia, once proud of its endless coal trains, there was a flicker of belief that a day of revival was just around the corner. And in Nevada, considered America's rare earth treasure trove, many families dreamed of a future where their children would no longer have to leave home to find work. But reality struck hard and fast. Not only did Arizona's copper mines fail to expand, one after another, they were locked up tight, production lines came to a halt, and thousands of miners quietly lined up for unemployment benefits. Coal train cars in West Virginia sat idle in the yards, thick dust covering their iron wheels, a stark reminder of a shattered dream. In Nevada, rare earth companies faced skyrocketing input costs and a drying up of credit, stalling projects once hailed as America's shield against China. As daily jobs disappeared, community life began to fracture. Workers lost their income, local shops stood empty, and state budgets fell short, threatening schools and hospitals alike. A crisis spiral took shape. Unemployment dragged down consumer spending, reduced spending pushed businesses into bankruptcy, and those bankruptcies plunged more families into uncertainty. Once thriving mining towns became hollowed-out landscapes where memories of their golden days lived only in faded photos hanging in somber coffee shops. Meanwhile, across America, people were grappling with rising living costs. A car, already a major investment for a middle-class family, now costs several $1,000s more, simply because steel prices had gone up. A newly built home, a generational dream for young Americans, was suddenly tens of thousands more expensive due to ballooning construction costs. Consumers, once hopeful that these policies would save domestic industry, were now the very ones paying the price. On Capitol Hill, congressional hearings echoed with outrage from governors and voter representatives. They demanded Washington reconsider, or at the very least provide emergency aid for affected communities. But the Trump administration stood firm on its course of absolute protectionism, viewing it as a political statement, proof to voters that the president was willing to endure short-term pain for long-term gain. Yet the burning question remained. How much longer would people believe in that promise when they were the ones losing jobs, losing homes, and losing faith? And while America struggled with wounds of its own making, just north of the border, a quiet neighbor seized the moment. Canada, a country long overshadowed by Washington's towering presence, was suddenly emerging as the unexpected winner in the global race for mineral power. While America's mining regions fell into silence, across the border, life surged back with newfound energy. From the vast forests of British Columbia, copper-laden trains rumbled through the valleys, hauling massive loads of ore toward the ports. In Ontario, nickel mines glowed with activity day and night. Machines roared to life as if announcing the dawn of a new era. Quebec, home to rich iron and gold deposits, saw a steady flow of workers returning and smelters operating at full capacity. The atmosphere here stood in stark contrast to the gloom in Arizona or West Virginia. While America was shutting down, Canada was expanding. While the U.S. wallowed in doubt, Canada surged forward with confidence. The Ottawa government didn't miss a beat. They quickly rolled out a strategy, signing a wave of long-term contracts with Europe and Asia, regions desperate for raw materials to sustain production. The free trade agreements Canada had painstakingly built, like CETA with the European Union and CPTP with the Asia-Pacific, suddenly became golden bridges, ushering Canadian minerals into global markets tariff-free. While American goods were being blocked at borders by Washington's own policies, Canadian ores and metals flowed straight into factories in Tokyo, Seoul, Berlin, and Paris. But Canada didn't stop there. Ottawa began pouring heavy investments into rare earth refining and processing, a sector considered the soul of high-tech industries. Cutting-edge labs and processing facilities sprang up at lightning speed. Canada was determined to prove it wasn't just a raw materials warehouse, but a technological hub for mineral processing across the Western Hemisphere. From rare earths for defense tech to copper for electric vehicles, everything was being set in motion for Canada to become an indispensable link in the global supply chain. In just a few short months, the mineral balance of power in North America flipped entirely. America stepped back, Canada surged ahead. The numbers told the story. Canada's metal exports skyrocketed, contract values hit record highs, and global mining giants scrambled to set up headquarters in Toronto and Vancouver. Experts dubbed it a century-defining shift, as control over strategic materials, once firmly held by the U.S., was now drifting steadily north. But this story doesn't end with just two countries. When minerals, from copper, nickel, and rare earths to gold, are considered the lifeblood of modern industry, America's retreat and Canada's boom sent the entire world scrambling to adjust. The shockwaves from North America rippled across continents, shaking global markets like waves rolling across the ocean. And from here, a new chapter begins, one whose impact will echo through the world economy at large. Copper, the lifeblood of the electrical and electronics industries. Rare earths, the soul of high technology. Steel and coal, the backbone of construction and energy. When Washington erected its tariff wall, these vital flows were thrown off their usual course. Copper prices on the Chicago Exchange surged day by day, driving up the costs of electric vehicles and energy storage batteries. Tech giants in Japan, South Korea, and Europe scrambled to find alternative sources because even a single delayed component could halt an entire production line. Rare earth prices became a heated topic in boardrooms from Tokyo to Berlin, as every microchip, every turbine blade, every modern radar system depends on them. Even gold, long considered a safe haven for investors, was pulled into the trade war, shaking financial markets and eroding global confidence. In the midst of that chaos, other resource-rich nations quickly stepped in. Australia, Chile, and Indonesia seized the moment, increasing export value and boosting their bargaining power with major buyers. The global mineral market began to reshape itself around a new orbit. No longer centered on Washington, the axis shifted toward Ottawa and rippled outward to other capitals. Long-term contracts, new shipping routes, and hastily built processing hubs signaled that the world was adjusting to a new reality, one in which the U.S. was no longer the sole power dictating prices and controlling supply. But while from the outside the world seemed merely disrupted, inside America, the impact left deeper scars. Because every price fluctuation on a global trading screen wasn't just a number, It was a real and growing fear in American households, lost wages, soaring costs, and a fading dream of stability. And from there, the political and social consequences within the U.S. began to surface, like widening cracks in a building that once seemed unshakable. In the mining towns that once thrived on natural resources, crisis was no longer a distant concept. It had become a haunting reality for every family. In Arizona, where copper mines once sustained entire communities, once bustling neighborhoods now lay under a blanket of silence. Cafes that used to be gathering spots for miners now stood nearly empty, owners left to sigh at rows of vacant tables. In West Virginia, the sight of coal trains sitting idle on the tracks didn't just signify economic paralysis, it struck deep into the collective of memory, where mining was once a proud tradition passed from father to son. In Nevada, rare earth tunnels, once hailed as strategic assets, had become nothing more than cold concrete shells caked in dust and forgotten. In this atmosphere, anger began to rise. Governors across the Midwest and West sent repeated appeals urging Washington to ease tariffs or deploy emergency relief packages. On television, congressional hearings flooded the screens. Laid-off workers choking back tears, small business owners pleading for help as they faced bankruptcy, lawmakers locked in heated debates over the administration's responsibility. But inside the White House, President Trump remained unwavering, insisting that this is the necessary sacrifice for America to regain its strength. That clash only deepened the divisions within American society. Citizens in heavy industry states felt abandoned, while the political elite in the capital viewed it all as a calculated strategic move. The losses were measured not just in missing paychecks, but in shaken faith. People began to ask, was America First truly meant for all Americans, or just a rousing slogan from a campaign stage? Meanwhile, beyond the borders, the world kept spinning. And the bitter irony was this: as America reeled from its self-inflicted wounds, Canada, its quiet northern neighbor, calmly stepped up onto the winner's podium. The mineral chessboard was no longer just about economics. It had become a geopolitical game. And in that game, Canada was rising fast, while America, step by step, was falling behind. For decades, the United States and Canada had been seen as twin pillars in the North American mineral supply chain. Washington held the central role, while Ottawa played the supporting brother in the background. But after a single unexpected tariff decision, that balance was overturned. America built a wall and isolated itself, while Canada seized the moment to step into the spotlight, becoming the one holding the keys to the entire value chain. As nickel-laden trucks from Ontario crossed the border and copper shipments from British Columbia docked in Asian ports, the world began to realize it wasn't Washington, but Ottawa that was now ensuring supply chain stability. Factories in Berlin, Tokyo, and Seoul began turning to Canada as a reliable partner. Trade agreements, once seen as secondary, suddenly became golden tickets, allowing Canada to step into the very space America had vacated. And the rewards were not just economic. Canada's diplomatic standing began to rise as well. European delegations, which once flew only to the U.S. to negotiate deals, now landed directly in Toronto or Ottawa to sign contracts face-to-face. Global conferences on energy, technology, and defense began setting aside seats for Canadian delegates, something once unthinkable. On the geopolitical chessboard, strategic minerals had become the new oil, and Canada now found itself holding one of the most powerful pieces. In contrast, the U.S. fell into a reactive posture. The soft power that once came from controlling global supply began to fade. When allied nations needed rare earths for defense tech, they no longer knocked solely on Washington's door. When corporations needed copper for electric vehicle production, they started weighing long-term contracts with Ottawa. Bit by bit, America's global influence in the mineral sector shrank, while Canada opened its arms wider to the world. This shift had even deeper consequences. Canada wasn't just exporting raw materials, it was building a full value chain of processing and technology. Rare earth refining centers emerged, metal research institutes received heavy investments. Ottawa's ambition was clear: to go beyond being a warehouse of resources and become a technological power in the resource economy. And with that, Canada wasn't just generating more revenue, it was gaining more leverage at every international negotiation table. While America struggled to explain mounting losses to its voters, its northern neighbor rose with quiet pride. A smaller country, but one that knew how to seize the moment and reshape the power map. And so the story was no longer just about export and import figures. It had become a geopolitical pivot, one where the U.S. faltered and Canada emerged as a rising force, shaping the future of the entire region. Ladies and gentlemen, in the end, one big question still hangs in the air. Is this merely a temporary stumble, or is it the historic turning point where America loses its role as North America's mineral superpower? If Washington acts swiftly, seeks negotiation, and works to restore the flow of resources with Canada, there may still be time to turn things around. But with every month of delay, that door closes a little more. The long-term contracts already signed with Ottawa, the metallurgical plants expanding in Toronto and Vancouver, and the global tech supply chains shifting definitively north, all are shaping a new order that may soon be impossible to reverse. In a world where minerals have become the oil of a new era, those who control the resources hold the upper hand, in trade, in technology, and in defense. And right now, the balance of power clearly tilts toward Canada. Instead of reinforcing its strength, America has shot itself in the foot, handing a golden opportunity to its northern neighbor. History may remember this period as a bitter lesson in the cost of a misguided choice. What do you think? Is this a bold strategy that simply needs time to prove itself, or a misstep that America will pay for over the next several decades? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found today's story meaningful, don't forget to hit subscribe so we can keep exploring, analyzing, and understanding the forces reshaping our world one day at a time.